Rejected bride sold with a sack on her head. Mountain man freezes the moment he sees her face. The rope bit into her wrists as rough hands shoved her forward. Clara stumbled, the burlap sack over her head making every step a gamble. She could hear voices arguing about her price like she was livestock at market. 3 days ago she had worn white lace and orange blossoms. 3 days ago Henry Morrison had looked into her eyes at the altar and called her a liar in front of everyone. The shame burned hotter than the tears she had cried since. Now she was here, wherever here was, being sold to pay her father's debts. The sack smelled of old grain and desperation. Through the rough weave she could make out shapes and movement, but nothing clear. "She'd better be worth what you're asking," a deep voice said. It rumbled like distant thunder, and Clara felt her heart skip despite her fear. "Mountain man pays or walks away," another voice replied. "Got 3 other buyers if you ain't interested." Clara knew that was a lie. Nobody wanted a rejected bride. The scandal had spread through 3 counties faster than wildfire. Henry had accused her of hiding a criminal past, of being someone she was not. None of it was true, but truth did not matter when a man like Henry Morrison spoke. Her father had looked at her with such disappointment, not because he believed the lies, but because the wedding falling apart meant his debts came due immediately. Henry had been financing everything, promised to clear the family ledger once they married. "Take the sack off," the deep voice commanded. "Money first," the seller countered. Clara heard coins hitting a palm. A lot of coins from the sound of it. Her stomach twisted. What kind of man paid that much for a woman sight unseen? What did he plan to do with her? Fingers worked at the knot holding the sack closed. The rope around her wrists stayed tight. Fresh air hit her face as the burlap lifted away, and Clara blinked against sudden sunlight. The mountain man stood 6 feet away. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that touched his collar and eyes the color of storm clouds. He wore simple clothes, clean but worn, and a gun belt that looked well used. He froze. Clara watched his expression shift from casual interest to something she could not name. His eyes widened, and color drained from his sun-bronzed face. For a moment she thought he might be sick. "You," he whispered. She did not know him. Clara studied his face, searched her memory. Found nothing. "I don't understand. Jacob, what's wrong with you?" The seller stepped closer, nervous now. "You look like you've seen a ghost." The mountain man, Jacob apparently, did not respond. He stared at Clara like she had risen from a grave. His hands trembled slightly before he clenched them into fists. Clara's fear doubled. Had Henry's lies reached even here? Did this stranger believe she was some kind of criminal? "Is there a problem?" she managed to ask, trying to keep her voice steady. Jacob shook his head slowly, but his eyes never left her face. "No problem. She's mine. I paid." "Sure did." The seller cut the ropes on Clara's wrists and pocketed his coins. "Pleasure doing business." Jacob moved forward and took Clara's arm, gentle despite his obvious shock. His touch was warm, careful not to hurt where the ropes had marked her skin. "We need to go," he said quietly. "Now." He led her to a horse, helped her mount, then swung up behind her. Clara had no choice but to lean back against his chest as they rode away from the trading post. Questions burned in her mind, but fear kept her silent. The mountain man's heartbeat thundered against her back, fast and hard. Whatever he had seen in her face had shaken him to his core. They rode for an hour before he finally spoke. "What's your name?" "Clara Dawson." Another long silence, then barely audible. "This can't be happening." Part 2 begins here. Clara felt Jacob's arms tense around her as they climbed higher into the mountains. The trail grew narrow, winding between massive pines that blocked out most of the afternoon sun. She had stopped asking questions after the first few went unanswered. The cabin appeared suddenly, tucked into a clearing with a view that would have taken her breath away under different circumstances. Smoke curled from the chimney, and a well-tended garden grew beside the porch. Jacob dismounted and helped her down without meeting her eyes. His hands shook again when they touched her waist. "Inside?" he said. "Please." The cabin's interior surprised her. Clean, organized, with books on shelves and curtains at the windows. This was not the rough bachelor dwelling she had expected. Someone had made this place a home. Jacob walked to the fireplace and braced his hands against the mantel, his back to her. Clara stood near the door, unsure whether to run or stay. "I need you to answer some questions," he said finally. "And I need you to be completely honest." "All right. Where were you born?" "St. Louis. My parents moved to Colorado when I was 10. "Your mother's name?" Clara hesitated. "Why does that matter?" Jacob turned around, and she saw anguish in his expression. "Please, just answer." "Margaret Dawson. She died." 2 years ago. He closed his eyes like she had struck him. When he opened them again, tears tracked down his cheeks. Clara's fear transformed into confusion. I don't understand what's happening. Before she married your father, Jacob said slowly, what was her name? I don't see why. Please, Clara. Something in his voice made her answer. Bennett. Margaret Bennett. Jacob nodded like he had expected this, though it clearly caused him pain. He walked to a chest in the corner, opened it, and pulled out a small framed photograph. Come here, he said softly. Clara approached on shaking legs. Jacob handed her the photograph, and she nearly dropped it. The woman in the picture could have been her twin. Same blonde hair, same green eyes, same delicate features. But the photograph was old, the woman's dress from a different era. Who is this? Clara whispered. My wife, Jacob said. Elizabeth. She died 5 years ago, giving birth to our daughter. Clara looked up at him, understanding beginning to dawn. I look like her. You don't just look like her. Jacob's voice cracked. You could be her ghost. When they took that sack off your head, I thought I was losing my mind. They stood in silence, both processing this impossible coincidence. Clara studied the photograph, traced the woman's face with one finger. The resemblance was uncanny, almost frightening. Where is your daughter? Clara asked. With my sister in Denver. She's been sick, and I can't care for her properly up here. I've been trying to save enough money to move closer, to give her a better life. Is that why you bought me? 'Cause I look like your dead wife? Jacob flinched. I bought you because nobody else was going to, and whatever drove you to that trading post, you deserved better than what those other men would have done. You paid a fortune without even seeing my face. I had the money, been saving for 3 years. For your daughter, yes. So now what? Clara set the photograph down carefully. You're stuck with a stranger who reminds you of your dead wife, and you've spent your daughter's future on me. Jacob rubbed his face with both hands. I haven't figured that part out yet. Despite everything, Clara felt a flicker of sympathy. This man had not asked for any of this either. He had made an impulse decision based on decency, and now they were both trapped in an impossible situation. I can work, she offered. I'm not useless. I can cook, clean, mend clothes, help with whatever you need. I'll earn back what you paid and then some. You don't owe me anything. Yes, I do. You saved me from something far worse than this. Jacob met her eyes finally, really looked at her instead of through her. Why were you there, Clara? What happened? So she told him. About Henry, the accusations, the collapsed wedding, her father's debts. She left out nothing, including her own humiliation and fear. Jacob listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker as she spoke. Henry Morrison, he said when she finished. I know that name. He's been buying up land around Red Creek, forcing people out. He wanted my father's property. The wedding was supposed to secure it legally, but you refused to go through with it after he humiliated you. I wanted to refuse, Clara admitted, but my father begged me to try to fix things, to apologize for whatever Henry thought I had done wrong. Henry was the one who called everything off. He said he could not marry a woman with such a questionable character. Jacob's jaw clenched. So he ruined you socially and financially at the same time. Yes, and your father sold you to pay debts Henry created. Clara looked away. That truth hurt too much to acknowledge directly. Jacob crossed the room and gently tilted her chin up. You are not property, Clara. You are not payment for anyone's debts. You are a person who deserves respect and safety. His words broke something inside her. Clara had not cried since the first night after the wedding disaster, had forced herself to stay strong through everything that followed. But now, in this stranger's cabin, looking into eyes that held only kindness, she wept. Jacob pulled her into an embrace, let her sob against his chest. He did not say anything, just held her steady while she fell apart. When the tears finally stopped, Clara pulled back, embarrassed. I'm sorry. You've earned those tears. She laughed shakily. What a pair we make. You bought a ghost, and I'm apparently living as one. We'll figure it out, Jacob said with more confidence than she thought he felt. One step at a time. That night, Jacob gave Clara his bed and made himself a pallet by the fire. She protested, but he insisted. As she lay in the darkness, surrounded by the scent of pine and wood smoke, Clara wondered what tomorrow would bring. In the main room, Jacob stared at Elizabeth's photograph and wondered the same thing. Morning came too early. Clara woke to the smell of coffee and bacon, found Jacob already cooking breakfast. He moved efficiently around the small kitchen, and she noticed again how clean everything was. Elizabeth trained you well, she said without thinking, then immediately regretted it. But Jacob smiled slightly. She did. Said she would not have a husband who could not feed himself properly. She sounds practical. She was. Sharp as a tack, could outshoot most men, and refused to let me get away with any nonsense. He paused. You remind me of her in more than just looks. The way you stood up to those men yesterday, even with a sack on your head. That's something Elizabeth would have done. Clara poured herself coffee. Tell me about her if you want to, I mean. So Jacob talked while they ate breakfast, and Clara learned about the woman whose face she wore. Elizabeth had been a teacher's daughter, educated and strong-willed. She had fallen in love with Jacob despite her family's objections to his rough mountain life. They wanted her to marry a banker in Denver, Jacob said. Someone respectable and wealthy. She told them. She would rather die happy in a cabin than live miserable in a mansion. Did she ever regret it? If she did, she never said so. Even at the end, when the midwife told her she was dying, she made me promise to remember the good years and not the last moments. Clara reached across the table and squeezed his hand. I'm sorry you lost her. I'm sorry you lost your chance at a normal life. They sat in comfortable silence until Jacob stood abruptly. I need to check the traps, gather firewood. You can rest, or there's books if you want to read. I'd rather help. What needs doing? Jacob looked surprised. You don't have to. I want to. I'll go crazy just sitting here thinking about everything. So Clara spent her second day in the mountains learning Jacob's routines. He showed her the garden, the root cellar, the stream where he got water. She helped him clean and prepare 2 rabbits from his traps, surprised at how easily she adapted to the work. By evening, they had fallen into an easy partnership. Jacob cooked the rabbits while Clara made biscuits from his stores of flour. They ate together on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple. This is beautiful, Clara said softly. It's why Elizabeth and I chose this spot. She said if she had to live far from civilization, at least she wanted a view that reminded her why. She was a smart woman. Jacob nodded, then turned to face Clara directly. I need to ask you something, and you need to think carefully before answering. Clara's stomach tightened. All right. What do you want to do? Long term, I mean. You can stay here as long as you need to, but eventually you'll have to decide. Do you want to try to go back home? Build a new life somewhere else? I'll help you either way, but you need to think about what you actually want. Clara had been avoiding this question since the moment the sack came off her head. What did she want? Her old life was gone, destroyed beyond repair. Her father had sold her, her reputation was ruined, and Henry Morrison controlled everything she had once known. I don't know, she admitted. Everything I planned for is gone. I don't even know who I am anymore without those plans. Then maybe that's where you start, Jacob suggested. Figure out who Clara Dawson is when nobody else is telling her. It was the kindest thing anyone had said to her in weeks. That night, Clara lay awake thinking about Jacob's question. Who was she, really? Not the perfect bride Henry had demanded. Not the obedient daughter who had tried to save her family. Not the rejected woman society had labeled as scandalous. Just Clara, whoever that might be. The next morning brought visitors. Clara was in the garden when she heard horses approaching. Jacob appeared from the woodshed, his hand resting casually on his gun. 3 men rode into the clearing. The leader wore expensive clothes and an expression of pure arrogance that made Clara's blood run cold. She knew that look. She had seen it before, on Henry Morrison's face the day he destroyed her life. Clara watched the 3 riders from the garden, dirt still under her fingernails from pulling weeds. Jacob had moved to stand between her and the visitors, his posture relaxed but ready. She recognized the protective stance, had seen her father take the same position once when bandits passed through town. The lead rider wore a black suit that must have cost more than most families earned in a year. His boots shone despite the dusty trail, and gold glinted at his collar. He sat his horse like he owned not just the animal, but the entire mountain. Jacob Turner, the man said, his voice smooth as oil. Been a while since anyone's seen you in town. Prefer it that way, Nathaniel. Jacob's tone held no warmth. What brings you up here? Nathaniel's pale eyes shifted to Clara, and she felt stripped bare by his gaze. He studied her like she was merchandise, and she fought the urge to run inside the cabin. Heard an interesting rumor, Nathaniel said. Someone matching your description bought a woman at Anderson's trading post 3 days ago. Paid quite a sum for her, too. My business is my own. Normally I'd agree. Nathaniel dismounted, and his companions did the same. But this particular woman might be my business, too. You see, there's a gentleman down in Red Creek who's very interested in finding a runaway bride. Clara Dawson, I believe her name is. Clara's heart stopped. Henry had sent men after her. Of course he had. He could not let her disappear and potentially tell people the truth about his manipulation. Jacob did not look at her, kept his attention fixed on Nathaniel. Don't know anyone by that name. Really? Nathaniel smiled, and it reminded Clara of the snake she had once seen before it struck, because that young lady in your garden looks remarkably like the description I was given. Blonde hair, green eyes, early 20s, pretty in a delicate sort of way. Lots of women fit that description, true enough. Nathaniel took a step closer, but not many of them end up being sold at Anderson's trading post on the exact same day Clara Dawson went missing from her father's house. Jacob's hand moved slightly closer to his gun. The gesture was subtle, but Nathaniel's men noticed. Their hands drifted toward their own weapons. Clara made a decision. She stood up, brushed dirt from her skirt, and walked toward the men. Jacob tensed, but she shook her head slightly. I'm Clara Dawson, she said clearly. And I didn't run away. My father sold me to pay debts your employer created. Nathaniel's smile widened. Miss Dawson, how wonderful to finally meet you. Mr. Morrison has been terribly worried about you. I seriously doubt that. He asked me to extend an offer. Return with me now, and he's willing to forgive the entire unfortunate situation. You can be married within the week, and all debts will be cleared. The offer should have been tempting. It was everything her father had wanted, everything that would restore her reputation and secure her family's future. But Clara had spent 3 days learning what freedom felt like, even if that freedom came wrapped in complicated circumstances. Tell Mr. Morrison I decline his generous offer, she said. Nathaniel's expression hardened. I don't think you understand your position, Miss Dawson. You have no money, no prospects, and a reputation in ruins. Mr. Morrison is offering you a lifeline. He's offering me a prison sentence disguised as marriage. Strong words from a woman who was just sold like cattle. Jacob moved fast. One moment he was standing still, the next he had Nathaniel by the collar, lifting him partially off his feet despite the other man's considerable height. You'll speak respectfully about the lady, Jacob growled, or you'll be picking your teeth up off the ground. Nathaniel's men drew their guns, but so did Jacob's other hand. Clara had not even seen him move. He held a pistol pressed against Nathaniel's ribs while somehow keeping his grip on the man's collar. Tell your boys to put their weapons away, Jacob said calmly. Otherwise your employer loses his messenger, and I lose my good mood. Nathaniel gestured sharply, and his men lowered their guns. Jacob released him but kept his own pistol ready. This isn't over, Nathaniel said, adjusting his collar. Mr. Morrison wants his bride, and he's not a man who accepts refusal easily. Clara's made her choice, Jacob replied. She's staying here, with you, a widowed mountain man with nothing to offer but isolation. Nathaniel laughed. How long do you think she'll last before she realizes what a mistake she's made? Clara stepped forward before Jacob could respond. Mr. Nathaniel, I've spent my entire life being told what to do, who to marry, how to behave. In the past 3 days, I've had more choice in my own existence than I had in 23 years. So yes, I'm staying here. Not because Jacob Turner forced me, but because it's what I want. Nathaniel studied her for a long moment. You'll regret this decision. Maybe, but it will be my regret to carry, not Henry Morrison's to inflict. The 3 men remounted their horses. Nathaniel looked down at Clara and Jacob with an expression that promised future trouble. I'll relay your message to Mr. Morrison, he said, but I should warn you both. He doesn't handle rejection well, and he has considerable resources at his disposal. We'll manage, Jacob said flatly. After the riders disappeared down the trail, Clara finally let herself shake. Jacob holstered his gun and gently took her elbow. You all right? I just made an enemy of one of the most powerful men in the territory, Clara said. I'm either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Probably both, Jacob agreed. But you were also right. Nobody should have to marry someone who manipulates and controls them. They went inside, and Jacob locked the door behind them. It was the first time Clara had seen him do that. Will they come back? She asked. Yes. Not today, maybe not tomorrow. But Morrison won't let this go. Clara sank into a chair by the fireplace. I've made things difficult for you. You didn't make anything difficult. Morrison did that all on his own. Jacob poured 2 cups of coffee and handed her one. Question is, what do we do now? I should leave. Go somewhere far away where Henry can't find me. You could do that, Jacob acknowledged. Or you could stay and fight. Fight? With what? I have nothing. Jacob sat across from her. You have the truth. You have witnesses who can testify to what Morrison did. You have me, and I have friends who owe me favors. Why would you help me like this? You've already done more than anyone could expect. Jacob looked at Elizabeth's photograph on the mantel. When Elizabeth was dying, she made me promise something. She said I had to keep living, keep helping people, keep being the man she fell in love with. I've been surviving up here for 5 years, but I haven't been living. Maybe helping you is my chance to keep that promise. Clara felt tears prick her eyes again. You miss her so much. Every day. But I'm starting to think she'd be disappointed in how I've been hiding from the world. He met Clara's gaze. You asked me earlier why I bought you. I said it was because you deserved better, and that's true. But maybe I also did it because some part of me recognized that we could help each other. I remind you of her. That must be painful. It was at first, Jacob admitted. But you're not Elizabeth. You're your own person, and I'm starting to see that clearly. Yes, you look like her, but the way you stood up to Nathaniel, the way you've adapted to being here, the courage it took to refuse Morrison's offer, that's all you, Clara. They sat in comfortable silence, sipping coffee and watching the fire. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the cabin walls in shades of orange and gold. If I stay, Clara said slowly, and we fight this together, what happens when it's over? I don't know, Jacob answered honestly, but we'll figure it out when we get there. Clara thought about her options. She could run, spend the rest of her life looking over her shoulder. She could give in, marry Henry, and live in comfortable misery, or she could trust this stranger who had shown her more respect in 3 days than her own family had in years.
All right, she said.
I'll stay. We'll fight. Jacob smiled, and Clara noticed it reached his eyes for the first time since she had met him. Then we better start planning. They talked late into the night, laying out what they knew about Henry Morrison and his operations. Jacob had information Clara lacked, stories of families forced off their land, of debts mysteriously appearing, of pressure applied in the shadows. He's building an empire, Jacob explained, buying up everything between Red Creek and the mining territories. Your father's land sits right in the middle of his planned expansion. So he never wanted me. He wanted the property. Probably figured you were a bonus. A pretty wife to show off while he consolidated power. Clara felt the last remnants of her broken heart heal over. Whatever she had felt for Henry had been based on lies and manipulation. She was well rid of him. How do we prove what he's done? She asked. We find other people he's hurt. We gather evidence. We make enough noise that someone with actual authority has to pay attention. That could take months. Could take a year or more, Jacob agreed. You sure you want to commit to that? Clara looked around the cabin, at the books on the shelves, at the photograph of Elizabeth smiling from the mantel, at Jacob's earnest face lit by firelight. I'm sure, she said, and she was. The next morning, Jacob rode down to his nearest neighbor, a family named the Johnsons who lived 5 miles south. Clara stayed at the cabin, practicing with the rifle Jacob had taught her to shoot the day before. He returned at sunset with news. The Johnsons were pushed off their original homestead 2 years ago. Morrison bought their debt from the bank and called it in early. They barely had time to pack before his men arrived. Will they testify? Martha Johnson will. Her husband's afraid, but she's angry enough for both of them. It was a start. Over the following weeks, they developed a pattern. Jacob would visit families in the area, carefully feeling out who might be willing to stand against Morrison. Clara would organize the information, writing everything down in a ledger they kept hidden under a loose floorboard. She also learned to live in the mountains. Jacob taught her to shoot, to track, to read weather patterns in the clouds. She taught him to read better, to write more clearly, to think strategically about their campaign against Morrison. They became friends, then partners in their mission. The ghost of Elizabeth faded slowly, replaced by the reality of Clara herself. Jacob stopped seeing his dead wife when he looked at her and started seeing a capable, determined woman with her own strengths. One evening, a month after Nathaniel's visit, they sat on the porch watching stars appear. I got a letter from my sister, Jacob said quietly, about my daughter Emma. She's recovered from her illness. That's wonderful news. Laura wants to know when I'm coming to get her. She's happy to keep Emma as long as needed, but she thinks Emma needs her father. Clara had known this moment would come. You should go to her. I can't leave you alone. Not with Morrison still looking for you. I can take care of myself now. You've taught me well. Jacob shook his head. It's not about your ability to survive. It's about not wanting to leave you. The words hung between them, weighted with meaning. Clara was afraid to examine too closely. Jacob, I know what you're thinking, he interrupted, that I'm confusing you with Elizabeth, that I'm not seeing clearly. But you're wrong. I know exactly who you are. Clara Dawson. You're brave and smart and stubborn, and somewhere along the way I started hoping you might want to stay here even after Morrison's dealt with. Clara's heart raced. What are you saying? I'm saying that when I bought you from Anderson's trading post, I thought I was saving you. But you've been saving me too. From loneliness, from giving up, from forgetting how to be human. He turned to face her fully. I'm saying that I care about you, not as a reminder of my past, but as my possible future. Clara searched his face, found only sincerity. This man who had started as a stranger, then become an ally, had somehow become essential to her happiness. I care about you too, she whispered. But we have to be careful. We can't let our feelings cloud our judgment about Morrison. Agreed. We finish what we started. Make sure you're safe. Then we figure out what happens next. Clara nodded, and Jacob took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. They sat together in the gathering darkness, two damaged people finding unexpected hope in each other. The peace lasted exactly 3 more days. Clara was alone at the cabin when the riders came. 6 men this time, led by someone new. Not Nathaniel with his smooth words and expensive suits, but a scarred brute who kicked open the cabin door like he owned it. She had the rifle, thank God. Jacob had insisted she keep it close whenever he was gone. Clara Dawson, the man said. You're coming with us. I don't think so, Clara replied, keeping her voice steady despite her fear. She backed toward the corner where she would have the best angle to defend herself. The man laughed. You gonna shoot all 6 of us? I'll start with you and work my way down. He stopped laughing. Mr. Morrison sent me to collect what belongs to him. You can come easy or hard, but you're coming. I belong to myself, Clara said, and I'm not going anywhere. The man moved fast for someone so large. He lunged at her, and Clara pulled the trigger. The rifle kicked hard against her shoulder, and the man screamed, stumbling backward as blood bloomed across his upper arm. The other 5 men drew their weapons, but Clara had already worked the lever action, chambering another round. Next one goes in his chest, she announced. Then I start on the rest of you. This cabin has thick walls and good windows. You'll have to come through that door one at a time, and I promise you won't all make it. The wounded man clutched his arm, his face pale. Crazy woman shot me. This crazy woman has 16 more rounds and nothing to lose. Leave now, or I'll prove just how crazy I can be. They hesitated, and Clara knew she had maybe 30 seconds before they decided to rush her anyway. 6 against 1 was bad odds, even with her defensive position. Then a shot rang out from outside, and one of the men dropped. Another shot, and a second man fell. Jacob appeared in the doorway, his rifle still raised. Drop your weapons and get on your horses. Anyone who's still here in 10 seconds dies. They believed him. Within moments, the surviving men were mounted and riding hard down the trail, leaving their wounded and dead behind. Jacob lowered his rifle and crossed to Clara, who was shaking so hard she could barely stand. He gently took the weapon from her hands and pulled her into his arms. You did good, he murmured. So damn good. Clara buried her face in his chest and let the fear finally show. Later, after they had dealt with the bodies and secured the cabin, Jacob made a decision. We're done hiding, he said. Morrison's escalating, and eventually he'll send enough men that we can't fight them off. We need to go on the offensive. How? We take everything we've gathered, and we go straight to the territorial governor. We bypass the local law Morrison has in his pocket and go straight to the top. That means leaving the mountains, going back to civilization. Yes, and it means bringing Emma home and introducing her to you properly. Clara's eyes widened. Jacob, you can't just spring a strange woman on your daughter. You're not strange. You're the woman who's been helping me build a case to protect all the families Morrison's hurt. You're the woman who defended my home against armed men. You're the woman I... He stopped, took a breath. You're the woman I want in my life, Clara. In Emma's life, too, if you're willing. I want that, Clara admitted. But what if she hates me? What if she thinks I'm trying to replace her mother? Elizabeth will always be her mother, but that doesn't mean there's no room for you, too. Emma's 5 years old, and she deserves to know a woman as strong as you are. They left at dawn, taking everything they needed and burning everything they could not carry. The cabin would be there when they returned, or it would not. Either way, they could rebuild. The journey to Denver took 4 days. Clara saw Jacob transform as they approached the city, his mountain man roughness softening into something more civilized without losing his essential strength. Laura Turner lived in a neat house on the edge of town. She answered their knock with flour on her hands and suspicion in her eyes. Jacob, she said. You didn't tell me you were bringing company. Laura, this is Clara Dawson. Clara, my sister Laura. Laura's eyes went wide when she got a good look at Clara's face. My God. I know, Jacob said, but she's not Elizabeth. She's herself, and she's important to me. A small voice called from inside. Uncle Jacob! Emma appeared, a whirlwind of dark curls and bright blue eyes. She launched herself at Jacob, who caught her and spun her around, both of them laughing. Clara watched them together and felt her heart might burst. When Emma finally noticed her, the little girl's eyes went round. You're so pretty. Thank you, Clara said, kneeling to be at eye level. Your father has told me wonderful things about you. Are you Papa's friend? Clara glanced at Jacob, who nodded encouragement. I hope so. I hope I can be your friend, too. Emma studied her seriously, then smiled. Okay. Do you like tea parties? Papa's terrible at them. I love tea parties. Then we can be friends. Just like that, with a child's simple acceptance, Clara was welcomed in. That evening, after Emma was asleep, the three adults sat in Laura's kitchen drinking real coffee and planning their next move. The governor won't see you without an appointment, Laura said. And appointments take weeks to arrange. We don't have weeks, Jacob replied. Morrison knows where we are by now. Then you need someone with influence to get you in the door faster. Laura tapped her fingers on the table thoughtfully. I might know someone. Samuel Wright. He's a federal marshal who owes me a favor. If anyone can get the governor's attention about corruption, it's him. Can you contact him? First thing tomorrow. Clara listened to them plan, still processing the fact that Emma had accepted her so easily. The little girl had seen her face, the face that matched the photograph of her dead mother, and instead of fear or confusion, she had offered friendship. Maybe some things really were meant to be. Samuel Wright turned out to be exactly what they needed. A stern-faced man in his 50s with a reputation for honesty that was legendary. He listened to their entire story without interrupting, examined their evidence carefully, and then made Clara tell him everything again while he took notes. This is serious, he said finally. If even half of what you're saying is true, Morrison's been running a criminal enterprise for years. It's all true, Clara insisted. I lived through part of it. And these other families, they'll testify? Martha Johnson will, maybe others if they know they'll be protected. Wright nodded slowly. I can get you in to see the governor, but you'll need to be prepared for resistance. Morrison has friends in high places. Friends who benefited from his crimes, Jacob added. Exactly. This won't be easy or quick. Nothing worth doing ever is, Clara said. Wright smiled slightly. I can see why you're willing to fight for her, Turner. She's got steel in her spine. The meeting with the governor happened 3 days later. Clara wore a borrowed dress from Laura, her hair pinned up properly for the first time in months. She looked respectable, civilized, nothing like the woman who had shot a man in self-defense just weeks before. The governor, Richard Hammond, was a politician through and through. He smiled warmly, offered them seats, and looked genuinely concerned as they laid out their case. But Clara saw the calculation in his eyes. He was weighing political costs, measuring risks, deciding how much trouble Morrison's downfall would cause him personally. These are serious allegations, Hammond said when they finished, but they're also largely built on circumstantial evidence and testimony from people who might have their own grudges. My grudge is that he tried to force me into marriage through manipulation and then sent armed men to kidnap me, Clara said sharply. Is that not legitimate enough? Hammond's smile cooled. Miss Dawson, I understand you're emotional. I'm not emotional. I'm angry. There's a difference. Jacob put a hand on her arm, calming. Governor, we have documented evidence of Morrison buying debts and calling them in early, forcing people off their land. We have witness statements. We have a pattern of behavior that goes back years. And I will have my people investigate, Hammond promised. But these things take time. How much time? Clara demanded. Months, perhaps longer. Clara stood abruptly. Then Morrison has months to destroy evidence, threaten witnesses, and solidify his power. Thank you for nothing, Governor. She walked out before anyone could stop her, furious at the injustice, at the slow-grinding wheels of official power that always seemed to favor men like Henry Morrison. Jacob found her outside, pacing in the governor's garden. That was reckless, he said. That was honest. Hammond's more worried about political fallout than justice. Maybe, but he's also our only real option. Clara knew he was right, but it did not make the truth any easier to swallow. They returned to Laura's house to find Marshal Wright waiting for them with news. I did some digging of my own, he said. Morrison's been careful, but he made mistakes. One of his enforcers got drunk and shot his mouth off to the wrong people. I've got testimony that directly ties Morrison to illegal land seizures and fraud. Will the governor listen? Jacob asked. He will when I tell him that this testimony came from a federal investigation I've been quietly running for the past 6 months. I've been building a case against Morrison, and your evidence fills in several gaps. Clara felt hope bloom in her chest. I mean Morrison's going down, Wright confirmed. But we still need your testimony and the testimony of others he's hurt. Are you willing to see this through to the end, no matter how long it takes? Clara looked at Jacob, then at Laura, then back to Wright. She thought about Emma sleeping upstairs, about the families Morrison had destroyed, about the life she wanted to build. I'm willing, she said. Whatever it takes. The trial, when it finally happened, became the talk of the territory. Clara sat in the witness stand for 3 hours, telling her story to a packed courtroom. She did not cry, did not waver, looked Henry Morrison in the eye, and spoke nothing but the truth. Morrison's lawyers tried to paint her as a scorned woman seeking revenge. They brought up her rejected wedding, her time at the trading post, suggested she had consented to be sold. Clara let them talk, and then she quietly destroyed every argument they made. I was sold, she said clearly, against my will, to pay debts that Mr. Morrison created through manipulation and fraud. If I had consented, I would not have had a sack over my head. Henry Morrison's face went red with rage, but his lawyers quickly silenced him. When Martha Johnson took the stand, she was just as fierce, just as clear. One by one, Morrison's victims spoke up, and the weight of evidence became impossible to deny. The verdict came down after 2 weeks of testimony. Guilty on 14 counts of fraud, extortion, and illegal seizure of property. Henry Morrison was sentenced to 15 years in prison and ordered to make restitution to all his victims. Clara stood in the courtroom and felt the weight of months of fear finally lift from her shoulders. Outside, Jacob waited with Emma. The little girl ran to Clara, who caught her up in a hug. Did you win? Emma asked. We won, Clara confirmed. That night, they celebrated at Laura's house. Clara's father sent a letter of apology that she read once and then burned. Some wounds could not be healed with words, but as she sat with Jacob on one side and Emma on the other, Clara realized she had found something better than forgiveness. She had found a new family, one built on choice and respect rather than obligation. What happens now? Jacob asked as they put Emma to bed together. Now we go home, Clara said. Back to the mountains, back to the cabin. We rebuild together. Clara took his hand. Together, if you'll have me. I'll have you, Jacob said quietly, for as long as you'll stay. Emma chose that moment to pipe up from her bed. Is Clara going to be my new mama? Both adults froze. Clara looked at Jacob, who looked back at her with a mixture of hope and fear. Would you want that? Clara asked Emma gently. Emma nodded seriously. Papa's happier when you're around, and you're good at tea parties. Clara laughed through sudden tears. Those are excellent reasons. So you'll stay? Clara kissed the little girl's forehead. I'll stay. They returned to the mountains a week later, the three of them together. The cabin had survived the winter, and they spent the spring making it into a real home. Jacob taught Emma to track and hunt, but Clara taught her to read and write. They built a balanced life, one that honored the past while embracing the future. 6 months after the trial, Jacob asked Clara to marry him properly with a ring he had made himself from gold panned from the stream. She said yes without hesitation. They married in the same meadow where Elizabeth was buried, with Emma as their witness and the mountains as their cathedral. It was not traditional, but nothing about their relationship had been. Clara wore wildflowers in her hair and spoke vows she had written herself. Jacob promised to love her not as a replacement for what he had lost, but as the unique woman she was. When they kissed, Emma cheered, and somewhere in the wind, through the pines, Clara thought she felt Elizabeth's approval. Life in the mountains was hard, but it was honest. They worked together, built together, loved together. Emma grew strong and wild and kind, shaped by two parents who adored her. Sometimes visitors would comment on Clara's resemblance to Jacob's first wife. She learned to smile and acknowledge it without letting it define her. She was not Elizabeth Bennet Turner. She was Clara Dawson Turner, mountain woman, witness to justice, mother to Emma, and wife to Jacob. She was herself, finally and completely. Years later, when Emma was grown and had children of her own, she would tell them the story of how her parents met, about the rejected bride sold with a sack on her head, and the mountain man who froze when he saw her face. But the story did not end with that moment of recognition. It began there, with two broken people finding unexpected healing in each other's company. Clara had been sold like property and had found freedom. Jacob had bought a ghost and found a future. Together, They had built something neither could have created alone. Every morning, Clara woke to the sound of the stream and the smell of pine. She would watch Jacob and Emma working together in the garden or exploring the woods, and she would remember the girl who stood trembling in a burlap sack, terrified of what came next. That girl would never have believed this life was possible, but Clara knew better now. Sometimes the worst moments led to the best outcomes. Sometimes rejection was redirection. Sometimes losing everything meant gaining something infinitely more valuable. She had been rejected, sold, and abandoned. But she had also been saved, loved, and cherished. The sack had come off her head in a moment that changed 2 lives forever. But the real transformation had nothing to do with her face, and everything to do with her courage to choose her own path. Clara Dawson Turner stood on her porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold, and knew she was exactly where she belonged. The journey from that trading post to this moment had been long and difficult, but every step had been worth it. She was home.